motion number 73. And it is a motion that may come as a surprise to some people here, but it does come as no surprise to anyone in this chamber that the Reason Party has had a long-standing policy of legalising, regulating and taxing cannabis use for adults. My previous motion on the paper, which I have as today withdrawn, was a much narrower inquiry focusing only on the commercial legalisation of cannabis in Victoria. And in these last few months, I have modified that position and thought on how this parliament should tackle cannabis. And I realise that cannabis is much bigger and a more complicated issue. This motion is a direct result of conversations I've had with the community, with health organisations, doctors, nurses, youth workers, lawyers, students, prison workers, police, people at train stations, in cafes and other MPs in this House and in the other place. Our community is crying out for a conversation about cannabis, the most widely used illicit drug in Victoria and Australia. What health effects is cannabis use having in our community? And how can we help better educate, particularly young people, on cannabis use as it relates to their mental health? How do we stop criminal syndicates profiteering from the sale of cannabis, given that there are billions of dollars changing hands every year? Profits, I add, that many criminal gangs then use to fund other illegal activities, such as the manufacture of drugs like ice. Some people believe that we can absolutely stop the use of cannabis if we could just better police its supply and punish offenders more severely. Others believe that the free market should prevail and it should control the supply and consumption of cannabis. Most other people seem to have a position somewhere on the spectrum between these two. But absolutely no one believes that what we are doing now is working. This motion simply poses the question, how do we keep cannabis out of the hands of young people and criminals? Australians, Victoria included, are some of the highest cannabis users in the world. In fact, young Victorians use cannabis twice as much as tobacco. According to the National Drug Strategy Household Survey of 2016, 22% of young people use cannabis, while only 11% of them use tobacco. Exactly double. In addition, Victorians in their 20s are about twice as likely to use cannabis as people in their 40s. That's 22% compared with 10.3%. Recent use of cannabis amongst males in their 40s and 50s and those aged 60 or older is at the highest rate seen over 15 years, indicating that there may be an ageing cohort of cannabis users, and I think that comes as no surprises. We may call it the baby boomers. More females in their 30s used cannabis in the previous 12 months in 2016. So we've seen an increase, significant increase over the last 3 or 4 years. 10% of Victorians have consumed cannabis in the past 12 months, and that figure is steadily rising. We are some of the biggest cannabis users in the world. What are we doing to protect the health and safety of those 100,000 or so Victorians? Education campaigns around cannabis have been pathetic, really. Many in this chamber will remember the infamous Stoner Sloth campaign. It went viral, but for all the wrong reasons. The Drug Law Reform report that was produced by the Law Reform Road and Community Safety Committee considered public health, public safety and education and concluded that there was a lot more to be done in this area. And there was very little response from the government to this report. And while the report looked at cannabis, it really came to the conclusion, as I say, that more needed to be done. And this inquiry will help us establish what does need to be done. The police recognise that the illicit cannabis industry in Victoria is worth $8 billion annually. $8 billion annually. In their submission to the committee last year, to the Law Reform, Road and Community Safety Committee last year, they stated, Victoria Police have identified that the cultivation and trafficking of cannabis often involves serious and organised crime. Flow-on effects have seen invasions of grow houses, extreme violence, proceeds to fund other criminal activity, theft of electricity, and grow houses presenting significant fire hazards, along with health and safety risks to police and emergency services members. But Victoria is not alone in this. Many other jurisdictions are tackling similar-sized operations. We have repeatedly heard from politicians and police that we cannot arrest our way out of the issue of drug use, but it appears we keep trying. The most recent figures I could find were the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission's Illicit Drug Data Report 2015 and 16. In that year, 25,683 Victorians were arrested for the possession of drugs, and 1,688 were arrested for supply. 51% of those were for cannabis. So that means that 13,000 Victorians were arrested in 1 year for the possession of cannabis. It's a huge arrest rate, and yet the figures show that cannabis use is steadily increasing in Victoria. And as a senior police officer admitted to The Age journalist John Sylvester, Melbourne is the engine room of the country's cannabis industry, or as others have put it, the Mull Bowl of Australia. He went in to say that this lucrative arm of organised crime is dominated by Vietnamese and Albanian syndicates that use a large part of the profits to make amphetamines and import ice, cocaine and heroin. The stressed rental market is being stripped of properties, with more than 1,000 being used as cannabis hothouses at any one time. We can help put a stop to this. This motion will explore how we can better deal with cannabis, what we can do to keep it out of the hands of criminals and children, and how we can better educate the public about the ongoing effects of cannabis use, in particular, the mental health issues often associated with it. In conclusion, this motion recognises two things. First, that cannabis is the largest illicit drug that Victoria has and will ever know, with huge drawings on the public purse to fund the current regulatory model that doesn't really deal with it. Secondly, the use of cannabis continues to increase in the community despite the record funding levels of this model of regulation. The increase in usage of cannabis is most notably with young people under the age of 25, while the supply of cannabis is being provided by an ever-increasing network of organised crime syndicates. Parents and concerned citizens all over Victoria want to know what is going on and how we can best protect their children from harmful drugs, and which system or which model could offer more promise in removing organised crime from our society. So I look forward to other comments on this motion, and in particular my crossbench colleagues. And I thank them for being supportive of me. And also I'm grateful for the people who've made helpful suggestions to this motion and what we wish this inquiry to explore. And I commend my motion to the House.
Yeah.